Welcome to part 2 of this series in which we build a beautiful gate, if I can say so myself, all the way from logs. In this part, the joinery. We started by laying out the dimensions of the final gate on the floor with strings, so we can place all the pieces and make markings and measurements. That's because we don't work with an exact drawing, it's all just marking and measuring. First, we go back to the sawmill, because it's the one tool we have that can easily make the cuts, because the cuts need to be nice and flat, parallel, pretty precise, and above all, pretty deep, so anything circular we have wouldn't cut it. Really, the only two tools we have that can make this cut are hand saws and this bandsaw mill, and we thought this was our best bet. We did have to do the last part by hand though, because we couldn't angle the beams on the sawmill, but because the start of the cut was perfectly straight, this worked out fine. One of the biggest struggles was to cut the middle out of these joints. A small coping saw didn't work at all, for various reasons, but the jiggly wiggly from the sides, with some hammering, did the job, and then some cleanup with the chisels of course. We quickly learned that it's unfeasible to widen the mortise, but that flattening the tenon is actually not that big of a deal. We first tried some chiseling, then some planing, but you'll see later that we eventually learned that a belt sander with 30 grit or something crazy low worked best. You might ask yourself why we don't just do half-lap joints, because those are much easier, and that probably would have worked too, but not only are they not as sick, but they are also much weaker. The dowels, which we will put through, only have to break at 1 point in the half-lap compared to 2 points in this mortise and tenon joint. So it's just much stronger. And because we are doing stupid design stuff in which one diagonal is in tension, which you should never do on a gate, we can use all the strength we can get. After the successful test of the first joint, we went to cut them all. So here is the full process of one of these joints. We mark them, we cut 2 slits on the sawmill. For the mortise side, we finish the cuts with the handsaw, then we cut most of the middle out with the jiggly wiggly and finish it off with some chisels. And for the tenon side, we also finish the cuts with the handsaw of course. Then we create a small guiding wall with a chisel and cut the sides off with a handsaw. Clean up the corners with a chisel and create a small undercut for the dust and the glue to go so the joint can properly settle all the way. After that we hit it with a belt sander until it fits. Sometimes a little bit of chiseling is needed in the corners. We do have one half-lap joint on each gate, because otherwise it's impossible to put together. I'm not sure what I did wrong here. One side is perfectly straight, while the other is very much not. If you know what causes this, let me know. On the other half-lap sides, we did the bulk of the cutting with the table saw and only finished it off by hand. Really, even though these half-lap joints are in the middle of a beam and therefore much harder than they would have been on the ends, they are so much easier than the other joinery we did. Time for the second round. As we don't work from exact drawings, but just by marking and measuring, we couldn't make these joints until now. And we made a huge mistake. These are crooked as shit, and we didn't have any more logs. These 2 parts are the smallest of the gate, and therefore didn't fit on the sawmill, so we had to use a support beam, which wasn't straight as it turned out. Oops. Luckily, we didn't need extra logs, as the offcuts you saw us make earlier were exactly long enough. I didn't film it, but we went back again and made some new slits. Some finishing touches to the wood. And time for the first full assembly. And shit, we have a problem. It's good on this side, loose here, tight there in the middle while the sides are way off, and then on the other side there's a huge gap again. We might have switched out one beam between the two sides of the gate, but strange thing is that the other side fitted perfectly fine. So I'm just cutting out the inside of that mortise a little and see where that brings us. And not perfect, but besides that crooked shoulder, it fits okay-ish. I can't make a new one because we don't have any logs, and I don't want to risk ruining this any further, so this will do. Time to cut off the last bits and do some final touch-up, and then we are ready for part 3, in which we'll treat the wood, do the final assembly with dowels and glue, fix the hanging hardware, and install it.